So, I know we're back here in my scrap wood corner again. But as you can see, it's starting to collect a bunch of scrap wood. So, I'm going to build this planer cart out of everything, not everything. Everything I use is going to come from the supply that's over here. I got to use some of this stuff up because this is my next wall to get done. So I have to kind of get all this back in the cart where it belongs and off of this wall. So I'm going to start cutting down some boards. We're going to lay some stuff out. We're going to do the sides like we did on the half miter station. And let's see how it turns out. So let's get started. So with any project, the first thing you need is a plan. At this point, I don't have a plan. I have a barrel. This is the barrel that catches all the wood chips that comes off of my planer. And I want it to be incorporated in this build. So I need to take measurements off of it. These 2x4s on top are to represent the braces that are going to hold the sides and the back together. So I need to use those. And then I need to find some of these pallet stringers that are going to be the sides of my panels. As you can see, looking at this barrel, it is already sitting pretty level with the benches, which means once I put wheels on this thing, it's going to be pretty tall. So I did realize that and realized that I had to go get a shorter barrel, which you will see later on in the video. At the joiner, we clean up a face and we square up an edge, and then we can take it over to the table saw to rip it down to a rough 2.5 inch width. Why 2.5, you ask? Well, that's just what felt good. I mean, they were around 3 inches, so 2.5 felt like I would be able to save the most material and get the most bang for my pallet. As you can see, there are several of these pallet stringers that I'm running through on this particular day. It took me about a day to get them all completely jointed, milled, and just ready to go. And it was at this point that I had come to the conclusion that this was going to be the last time I was going to be able to use the planer in this configuration, which I was kind of excited about and a little bit sad at the same time, because I like my planer in this configuration, except for the constraint of the 70 inches that I can run through it. I was also starting to get a little nervous because I've grown accustomed to using my workbench to help feed my planer. See, I run them through, I stack them on the bench, I take them off the bench, I run them through the planer, and it's just a nice little workflow. How's my workflow going to be when it's on this new stand? Will I have a place to set them? Will I hate it? I don't know, but we're going to do it anyways. Look at all that beautiful wood a day of work has yielded. So this is what was cut off our stringers to make the sides. And I have these, hold on, left over from other sides. So we're going to use that for the top. Now my original idea for the top was to use pallet boards like I had used in the half miter station video. But when I went down to get those particular hardwood pallets, there was only a few pallets available, and that was not enough for me to be able to do this top. So that seemed like a good time to use all these offcuts and everything that was left over from ripping down the hardwood stringers. That way I could still have a hardwood top and not have to worry about getting those pallets. But it does kind of make me nervous, because where's all those pallets at? I'm going to need those in the future. So this next part I'm going to go ahead and apologize for now, because as you can clearly see, this is on a different day. And well, I glued up the first block of this top because I'm doing it in 2 sections. I need it small enough to go through my planer, which is 13 inches. After cutting them on the table saw, I glued up the first block and set that aside and moved on to another part of the project. The next day I came out, removed those from the clamps, and this is what happened. I come out after work and put the next block in clamps. All I'm doing is taking all those offcuts, gluing them all together, and squishing them down, just like I've done on the toolbox top and the half miter station and several other tops that I've done. And this is a method that works really well for me because these are hardwood and very durable, and they look beautiful when they're completed, even though they're all made out of pallet wood. Another nice part about this method is you can make a top any thickness you want, as long as you have enough pallets to yield enough boards to make it as wide as you need. So this is the other project that I had talked about moving on to earlier after gluing up the first block. These are my rails and stiles, so to say. Now, I'm not using a rail and stile router bit set on this. I'm going to be using half laps. So I set up my stop block, as you can see here. I use that stop block to cut 6 of the lengths I need, and then I pull it off the bench and I cut the other 6. Once everything's cut to length, we can go over to the table saw, which I have inserted a dado stack, and cut the rabbets out, which I will be putting 1/2-inch boards in. And then remember I said I was going to be doing half laps? Well, here's me doing half laps. And like I mentioned in the half miter station, it is important to cut the face first. That way you can set up for the correct length when you do the back of your half laps. See, I set up my dado stack, and now I am able to cut my half lap for the other part. This is good information to have, because if you screw this up, you have to completely redo these boards. And I did not have enough boards milled up in the half miter station to redo this. I had to make all new boards, run them through the joiner, the table saw, the planer, all that happy horse shit, and it got really discouraging really fast. So be sure to make sure you measure and have all the information before going to your table saw. So we got 6 rails, 6 stiles. We got a square clamped in place. We're going to clamp this one in place, put some glue on it, and put some screws in it. We're going to do 3 of them. So, now I'm aware this may not be considered fine woodworking, but I think it looks good, it's solid, and, well, it's quick. And quick is good. It's also shop furniture, okay? It's going to be in my wood shop. I'm the only one who's going to be in here most of the time, and I appreciate the way it looks. I like the way these screws look. They're the black panhead screws. And to me, they look like upholstery buttons. And I'm a big fan of that look myself. So shop furniture is a particular subject that I kind of want to touch on. Just because it's shop furniture doesn't mean it has to be ugly. You spend all your time in your shop creating beautiful pieces for other people, whether it's customers or your wife or your kids. And why can't you make beautiful stuff for yourself? Shouldn't the stuff you make for you look just as good as the stuff you make for them? And this is the style I like, so it's my shop furniture, why shouldn't it look as good as I want it to? So you just seen me put the brad nails in the back. Those really aren't structural. All they're there for is to hold those boards into the glue while I flip it over so that I can get these screws ran in. I pre-drilled the holes because it's hardwood and I don't want it to split, and some of these boards are pretty thin, like inch and a half, whatever was available in that wood cart. Which kind of brings me to the next point on this build. On the half miter station, all my boards were ran vertically. I really wanted to do the same thing on this particular one, but I didn't have boards long enough available, and I really wanted to use up as much of this scrap wood as possible. But there were plenty of them that were long enough to go horizontal. So I cut them to length and we put them inside these panels. After getting all 3 panels assembled, I set it up on the table just like this, and I set it just to the edge of the table. That way I could pre-drill it and run the screws into the sides. Again, they are the black band head screws, so they have that particular look to them. Now these are where those 2x4s from earlier on the barrel come in. These are going to be the supports for my bottom and the top. I have it clamped in place, and I was able to run them in right from the outside of the cabinet. And then I need a place for my barrel to sit, so I put this center brace in. That way my barrel doesn't fall through the bottom. I'll probably have to put a full bottom in this later on because I plan on putting a shop vac in here. The reason I leave the bottom open like this is because the planer does create a lot of pressure in that barrel, and I need a place for that pressure to escape. So instead of putting filters in like I've seen in other videos, I just left the bottom open. I don't have to look at an ugly filter on the side. So here we go again, bouncing around on days. But you can see my tops are nice and glued together, and we will go ahead and run them through the planer to get all that glue squeeze out and the black crap from my clamps all cleaned off of it. Now, these tops aren't as thick as I wanted them to be. I would have liked the tops to actually be 2 inches. But considering the fact that we're using whatever scrap wood was left over, they still came in at around 7/8 of an inch thick once I got them all ran through. It's not a terrible thickness for a top, but I think a thicker top would have been better for the planer, because the planer tends to create a lot of vibration, and I'm a little on the worried side that this is going to tear itself apart. But as far as the way it's looking, considering this is just scrap wood, I mean, it's looking pretty cool. I'm loving the way this thing's looking. And the seam for the joint, man, I tell you what, I couldn't have hit that any better. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to put some biscuits in. That way it'll help me with alignment, and I won't have nearly as much sanding to do later on. Well, I hope anyway. So after getting the biscuits in, we're ready to go ahead and glue this thing together. Now, I'm using a lot of glue, and then I'm using about 6 biscuits, I think. 5 or 6, something like that. And again, they're not for strength. They're just to help me align this so I don't have to do nearly as much sanding later on. Because I don't have a planer big enough to run a 24-inch board through, and I don't have a belt sander or access to either. So I don't want to spend half my life sanding this thing down. Now I have what's going to be the top side facing up. That way I don't get any of them black marks in the center of the top, and I'm using a scraper to clean up as much of the glue as possible from that seam. And then I hit it with some 120 grit sandpaper immediately after getting everything squeezed together. And then I'm going to throw a couple of clamps on the top just so I don't get any warp or bow in it, and everything stays nice and flat, because flat is good. And then we'll come out the next day and we'll start squaring everything up. Some of you subscribers may know I don't have a track saw. And, well, I'm pretty lazy, so I'm just going to go ahead and square this up on the miter saw and cut it on one side, flip it over, and cut the other side. Then we'll take it over to the table saw and set the fence so that I can cut the other side off at the final width, which is 24 inches, by the way. I made this 24 by 26 inch top because the planer needs a 24 inch footprint, and, well, I decided to make it 26 just to give it a little bit on either side. And then, just to make it nice to the touch, I put a 1/4 inch round over on the bottom side of it, and then I moved it around and I put a 45-degree chamfer on the top of it. And it looks pretty good. You'll see here in a few minutes. Now, just like the drill press cart, I decided just to go ahead and screw this in from the top. I went ahead and pre-drilled everything, and I clamped it all down, that way it would hold tight to the cabinet. I'd mentioned earlier that I'm afraid that this thing's going to rip itself apart because of vibrations, and I wanted to be able to change it out later on if I needed to. And now for the part that I don't know if y'all like or not. So if you like this aged barrel stain for shop furniture, let me know down in the comments. If not, let me know down in the comments. I would like to know what y'all think about it. I've had some people look at it who's been in my shop, and they seem to really like the way it looks. I myself, I like the way it looks. I think it looks pretty good. But I'm still a huge fan of the natural wood. The natural wood on the shop furniture is not going to stand out from the natural wood on my pallet wood walls. Everything will just kind of blend in together, and I just think it needs to stand out a little bit by itself. So let me know what you think in the comments. But this is what it looks like once you get the stain on there. So now that we have 3 sides, a top and a bottom made, I need to make a door for the front of this. And here are some more pallet stringers. Now, I wish I had learned this a lot sooner, because I could have saved a lot of these pallet stringers just by cutting the nail holes out of the center of it, and then cutting it down to roughly, well, just a hair over 1 inch. That way I could save a little bit of stress on my planer. But now that these pallets seem to be disappearing and not as available as they used to be, I'm really sad, because this is a fantastic technique that I wish I had learned earlier. This is a great way to produce 1-inch boards. And most of these stringers are over 3 inches in width, like square, 3 by 3. So after I get everything cut, I just go ahead and cut them down to 2.5 inches like I did the other rails and stiles, because, well, the door should look like the sides, right? So we take them back over to the miter saw, and we use that makeshift stop block again. And if y'all don't know, that makeshift stop block is usually just a piece of scrap wood that I brad nail right to my miter station top. It's a little crude, but it gets the job done. And because my editing skills here on YouTube are still not that great, somehow I missed the fact that I did a mortise and tenon style door. Now that's a piece of 1/4 inch plywood that I had left over from the half miter station, and I figured I would go ahead and use that since it was scrap wood. And then I put a 45-degree chamfer all around the front edge of it, and it looks pretty good. I like it. I just kind of adjusted the bit up until I got a depth that I thought was visually pleasing to my eyeballs. What do y'all think? You think that's visually pleasing? Do your eyeballs like it? Yeah. Oh well. Anyway, I went ahead and bought a piano hinge, which is like 18 bucks at your local Blows. And now we're cutting out the rabbit, dado, relief. I don't know. What do y'all call it? Let me know. So after getting the rabbit cut out, I just went ahead and installed the piano hinge right to the door. And then with some CA glue and some activator, I glued it to the cabinet. Now I can sink some screws into it because that CA glue is holding it in place. I don't know if you've all ever tried this trick before, but it actually works pretty good for hinges because you're able to set it down right where you want it, and then you can go back and screw it in later. And it keeps your hinge from moving around while you're trying to screw it. Screw it. But I just went ahead and put one at each end. That way it would hold in place while I go get something to prop this door open so I can put all the other screws in. See, that CA glue, it's strong enough to keep it there, but it's not strong enough to actually hold the hinge while you're flexing this door in and out. Once you've got those two screws in place, you're comfortable, or can be comfortable, to move around at your leisure, leaving the door hang open, knowing that it's not going to fall off. As you can see, I've got it propped up with my stool that I mentioned a few videos might get thrown away or turned into a drawer. It did not get turned into a drawer. It is still a stool, and I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get rid of it at this point. It's a pretty handy little stool. And because it can't be a mobile planer stand without wheels, I guess we got to put some wheels in it. So I decided to put these swiveling casters on it. All four of them swivel. That way I am free to pull it and push it and drag it in any direction I feel necessary. Then, after we have the wheels on it, we can go ahead and drill for the handle. Does it need a handle? Well, I guess you could use a knob, or you could use your router and run a groove in it for some finger pulls. But I have some handles that I had purchased that are going to match all of my shop furniture. So that is what I'm going to put on it, because I found these handles at Lowe's and they were on sale for $1.52, so I bought a crap ton of them. And at $1.52, well, you can't beat it really. So this is what's going to be on all my shop furniture from now on. So now that I've got the cabinet all together and stained and looking all pretty, it's time to add the planer. Now, which direction do you put your planer? Do you want it facing the door? Do you not want it facing the door? I don't know. So I decided that I'm going to set it on there and see what looks best. And once I did, I realized that I did want it facing the door because the exhaust port sticks out quite a bit. So I want the hose to still be contained within the planer cart itself. That way when I store it up against a wall, I'm not bumping that hose every time. Once I get it to where I think I want it, I take a pencil and I draw a light line all the way around the footprint of the planer itself, because I have to drill a hole in the top of this to run the cord down through, and I'll explain why later. But for now, I need to know where to put this thing back. Now I have this double-sided 3M tape that I got from somewhere for something. I don't remember what it was, but I found it when I was redoing the miter saw station, and I thought maybe this would cushion some of the vibration on the bottom, so I applied it. Now it's time to drill that hole I was talking about. And since I drew a line around my planer, I know exactly where I can drill holes at. So once I got the hole drilled in it, we can go ahead and clean up the top of it. And I'm going to put one of these wire prettier uppers in there to make the hole look all nice and neat. Which, in hindsight, I guess I really don't need one in there because, well, the planer's going to hide it. I stick the cord through and go find my wire cutters, and we can drop the rest of the cord in and get the planer installed. Now, as you can see, maybe if you looked, my planer head is not all the way up. When doing this, make sure your planer is to its highest depth when you do this. It's very important later on when you're doing wire management inside, because if you don't have your head all the way to the top, then you zip tie all your cords to the inside of your box, well, it stretches your cord. It may even rip it out. You want to make sure you have plenty of room for your cord to travel the entire length of travel on your planer. So you may wonder why I'm drilling a hole in the side of my cabinet. Well, that's because I plan on putting a surge protector in here. And there's a reason why for that too. Because I mentioned earlier that I plan on putting a vacuum cleaner in here. I'm going to put that vacuum cleaner on one of them remote switches that I use for my dust collection for my miter saw and my shop vac. And if I don't have it in there, then I have to put it somewhere else, and it's just going to be much easier to have it all contained inside the cabinet on one cord. And because we're going to be able to see this hole, I'm going to put one of these wire hole prettier uppers in this spot too. That way it looks like a nice pretty wire hole. And now I have my surge protector all installed, and all my wire management is contained up there in the top. So the barrel shouldn't hit it and everything should stay nice and clean. And because Lowe's did not have exactly what I was looking for as far as wire management for the outside, I found these couple of coat hangers that they had and bought 2 of them, and that makes a pretty nice little cord wrap. Now I have to put a hole prettier upper for my dust collection hose, and I did not realize when I was drilling the hole that I was drilling like clean through a board. So I had to run a couple of extra screws to hold that board in place. Not really a big deal, but just something to consider if you're doing the same. Don't use a 3-inch hole saw to drill through a 2-inch board. You got to use screws later on. You can see them middle screws while I'm running the round over on the inside of it, just to make it a little safer to the touch. So you can see how everything kind of tucks into one little footprint. And you can see how the barrel fits nice and tight inside. It's all looking pretty good. So the next thing we got to do is try it out and see if it blows apart. And I don't know if you've noticed yet, but you can see that my habits are still kicking in here, because I'm running the planer in the exact same spot that it was when the bench was there. These are the habits that I'm going to have to get myself out of, because that space is not going to be available much longer. I'm going to have to change the way I plane boards. But as of right now, this thing is working fantastic. I mean, everything is just the right height. I built it just so it's a little bit taller than all my workbenches and my table saw. So after running that many stringers, I can't really say that the dust collection is better, but that's not really what we were going for in the first place. Hopefully, after I get all the shop vac stuff in there, I won't have this mess anymore. But at least it's in a pretty tight spot where I can get it with a broom. Let's see how much actually went in the barrel. So this barrel is actually an upgrade as well. Not only is it shorter, but it has a plastic ring instead of the metal ring. And it's an easier open technology, I guess you would call it. it pops open with just my hands instead of me having to go get a pair of pliers to pull the lock down. This locking mechanism is much easier to use, and because I glued the bed sheet to the top of the barrel, I don't have to fold the other one up all the time. So I would say it's definitely about the same. And if I'm really annoying, I can really piss off my neighbors and do it outside. It just depends on how big of an asshole I really want to be. But this build really wasn't about dust collection. It was more about mobility and footprint. And I hit both marks on those. It is easily mobile. I could do a 300-foot board right now if I want to. It's not going to happen, but I can if I want to. Also, once I put the shop vac in here instead of the barrel, it will improve dust collection greatly. And I got my cord wrap here, just a couple of coat hangers found at the box store, and they work great for hanging my earmuffs on. So, all pallet wood, give it a shot. That's all I got for today. See y'all later.